My name is Clint Reiser. I'm a Director of Supply Chain Research at ARC Advisory Group, and today I'll be presenting on research findings that ARC Advisory Group conducted in partnership with DC Velocity magazine. The focus of the online survey and the research itself is the future of warehousing. In particular, we're going to discuss the priorities and expectations of practitioners like you. So the agenda for today's presentation is we'll first discuss the findings from order fulfillment channels in use and expectations, followed by work organization methods, and we'll discuss the use of batch and wave release as well as waveless release processes. We'll dig into warehouse technology adoption and value expectations. In particular, we'll discuss emerging warehouse automation technologies, established warehouse automation technologies, software adoption expectations, and then we'll sort of bring it all together at the end with some key takeaways. And just as an aside, Manhattan Associates plans to make this presentation available after the event. If you do choose to view the presentation at that time, the appendix has information on the respondent industry profile and the methodology used to obtain the results. So it's, for me, sort of the overarching theme of the findings from this research can be summarized in two quick statements. There is and will continue to be an increased need for agility and responsiveness in today's warehouse operations. And part and parcel with that is that there is an ongoing rapid migration toward the adoption of and use of warehouse automation. Let's dig a little bit more deeply into the specific findings from the research. Okay, let's talk about order fulfillment channels and work organization methods. We asked respondents about specific order fulfillment channels and the expected change in fulfillment volumes along these channels over the next 3 years. And we provided respondents with a scale of responses from increase extensively to decrease extensively. And what you see in front of you is the percentage of respondents that chose increase extensively for the 4 channels listed. As you can see, direct-to-consumer was by far the channel that the most respondents expected to increase extensively over the next 3 years. And this is followed by direct fulfillment of a retail partner's customer orders, also known as drop ship. And then finally, the slower growth channels are traditional store replenishment and DC replenishment. Let's take a little bit more of a deep look at the high growth channels. Okay, looking at direct-to-consumer fulfillment, we have a breakdown by the industry group of the respondents, or the industry sector. As you can see, 70% of 3PLs included in our response sample expect direct-to-consumer fulfillment to increase extensively over the next 3 years. That's quite the high number, I believe, and what that tells me is that 3PLs view direct-to-consumer fulfillment as a high growth channel for their business. And this is followed by retailers at 58%. So clearly they expect what has been a fast growing channel for them, direct to consumer, to continue over the next 3 years. And then this is followed by manufacturers and wholesalers. Now looking at drop ship. Again, this is the percentage of respondents by industry that expect drop ship to increase extensively over the next 3 years. As you can see, not nearly as substantial as direct to consumer, but still the order of the industries remains the same. Whereas 3PLs are the industry group that expect drop ship to increase extensively the most, followed by retailers and then manufacturers and wholesalers. I personally expected manufacturers and producers to be higher on this list, expecting that the consumer goods companies, some of the apparel brands would be forced more and more to fulfill orders dropship orders for their retail partners. Our response sample did not capture that, though. Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about picking unit types. I think the general perception is that picking units are getting smaller. What was once pallet fulfillment is now turning into cartons or mixed pallet fulfillment. What was once carton fulfillment is now turning into picking eaches and picking multiples and fulfilling direct to consumer. Again, we provided respondents with the option to say, okay, what are your expectations for change over the next 3 years, with a change scale from increase extensively to decrease extensively. As you can see in front of you, a full 38% of respondents said that they expect piece picking to increase extensively over the next 3 years, and a full 38% also said they expect it to increase moderately. And then these growth expectations for piece picking was followed by growth expectations for case carton, and then finally pallet. And I think that what these results support is the common view that that picking units are getting smaller, handling units are getting smaller, picking units and handling units are getting greater in a facility, and therefore complexity is going up and warehouse costs are also increasing. So what work organization methods are facilities using today? We simply asked the respondents, are you currently using system-directed batching and waving? 71% said they are, and 29% said they are not. And my personal assumption is that 29% that are not using system-directed batching and waving are likely representative of more simple warehouses. They're not the complex warehouses that would benefit from using system-directed batching and waving. So we did ask those respondents that are using system-directed batching and waving, how has the change in your use of system-directed batching and waving changed over the last 3 years? A full 62% said that it's increased as a percentage of total picks, and the remaining 38% said that it's remained about the same, whereas 0% said that it has decreased as a percentage of total picks. What that tells me is that batching and waving is an established standard process for complex warehouses, and it's not going down. Its use is actually still increasing as warehouses become more complex and warehouse processes become more mature. So now taking a look at waveless or dynamic release fulfillment processes. Clearly not as well established as batch and wave processes. We asked respondents, are you currently using waveless fulfillment processes? Only 35% of respondents said that they are, and a full 65% said that they're not. But we did ask those that are currently using, waveless processes, how has your change in the use of waveless fulfillment been over the last 3 years? A full 76% said that it has increased as a percentage of total orders fulfilled, while the remaining 24% said that it's remained about the same, and 0% said that it has decreased. So what that tells me is that waveless fulfillment is more of an emerging process. It's not as well established as batch and wave release. However, it has been growing more rapidly, and I believe it will continue to grow more rapidly going forward. So taking a look at waveless fulfillment processes in a little bit more detail, we asked those that are using waveless fulfillment, what their use is by fulfillment channel. And this is a fairly complex slide, but I think it tells a lot. If you look at the vertical y-axis on the left, you can see the 4 fulfillment channels listed. And then we provided respondents with a range of choices from currently using system-directed waveless to what you can consider as a timeline at the bottom. Expect to use within a year, expect to use in 1 to 3 years, and then expect to use in 3 to 5 years. And then, of course, we also provided respondents with the option to say it's either not applicable or no plans to use. And I think that the key takeaway from this chart is that the high frequency up to the upper left-hand corner says that direct to consumer is the driving force behind the adoption of waveless fulfillment. However, its use is sort of expanding and spilling over to other types of fulfillment, other fulfillment channels. Now, we did ask respondents to comment on their usage of waveless fulfillment and the benefits that they obtain. And the first response you see is by a 3PL, and he simply put flexibility and responsiveness. And I think that those two terms are overarching value propositions of waveless fulfillment. Most of the following comments, I think, can sort of be categorized under those two words. The retailer said ability to support expedited shipping requirements. Again, I think that that's a common reason for using waveless fulfillment, and that certainly falls under the category of responsiveness. A 3PL stated looking for additional speed in direct-to-consumer process. Again, responsiveness. Now, the manufacturer comment, I think, is an exception. This respondent said their planned use will greatly influence our batch picking process and make the facility as a whole much more efficient. And I think that this point, this respondent's point, brings out the fact that waveless fulfillment not only is used for responsiveness and flexibility, but it can also provide efficiency benefits. Sometimes, or very often, that can be in greater warehouse automation utilization. A retailer said the value drivers for waveless fulfillment are responsiveness, prioritization, and picker efficiency. Again, picker efficiency shows that there are ways that you can gain additional throughput efficiencies from the use of waveless fulfillment, not just responsiveness and flexibility. And I think the word prioritization is important in the fact that waveless fulfillment often provides the ability to dynamically reprioritize tasks and orders as the day progresses and as the situation and the context of your operations changes throughout the day. Finally, a retailer said orders are streamed in throughout the day and tasked based on must ship by dates. Again, I think that's an example of how waveless can sort of drive almost a pull process, like like a Kanban process in manufacturing. Okay, let's move on now to warehouse technology adoption and value expectations. We simply asked respondents, what is the likelihood of your organization investing in warehouse automation over the next 3 years? And a full 60% said that it's very likely, and an additional 19% said that it's likely, so fairly high likelihood. But we also asked respondents, what are your expectations for the change in the value proposition of warehouse automation over the next 3 years? And we couched this question saying, what are your expectations for the change in comparison to the alternative of a manual warehouse? Now, a full 96% said that they expect the value proposition of warehouse automation to expand or become more applicable to their operations over the next 3 years. And the remaining 4% said they expect it to remain the same, with 0% saying they expect it to diminish. I think that those are very telling statistics that show warehouse automation is becoming more and more relevant and more applicable to the day-to-day operations of warehouses today and going forward. So we also asked respondents as a follow-up question, what are the value drivers for warehouse automation? Why do you see it becoming more and more applicable? Okay, and then we listed 6 value drivers. The top 3 that have the bar charts next to them were the top 3 factors that received, the categorical, it's a primarily influential factor. We provided respondents with a scale of influence. They could choose it's a primary influential factor, it's a secondary influential factor, or it's not influential. And labor shortage was the factor that received the highest percentage of primary influential factor, followed by increasing throughput requirements, and finally by increasing labor costs. So those are the top 3 responses. The other factors not listed with a numerical value are a decrease in automation costs, improvements in automation scalability, and greater automation flexibility. For me, the key takeaway from these statistics is that the primary factors for the anticipated increase in the value proposition of warehouse automation is the operating environment of warehouses, the challenges that they face. Secondary to that, supporting to that, is the advances that have actually occurred within warehouse automation. Scalability, adaptability, lower costs, they're supporting factors. So we asked respondents specifically about established categories or types of warehouse automation and what their adoption expectations are. And we provided them a time scale, and we also included an option to say, okay, it's really not applicable. It's really not something that we're looking to adopt. And as you can see, conveyors and automatic sortation is the category that the highest percentage of respondents chose as something that they expect to adopt either within the next 12 months or the next 1 to 3 years. What that tells me is that although it's a long-established technology, it's still being utilized and expected to be utilized. And it also tells me that this high number is likely at least partially driven by the fact that conveyors are ubiquitous technology. A manual warehouse may have some form of conveyors. An organization that invests in a large capital project such as an ASR system is likely to also invest in conveyors as part of that large-scale capital investment. The number 2 option, shuttle systems, again, large capital investment. Separate ARC research shows that investment in shuttle systems and adoption of shuttle systems is growing rapidly. But again, those systems also likely are purchased, likely have conveyors as part of the implementation of that subsystem. And then finally, you have the remaining 3 categories. Also somewhat substantial adoption, but not as much as conveyors and shuttle systems. Asked separately, adoption expectations for emerging warehouse automation technologies. Again, not quite the same expectations for adoption as the established technologies, but still fairly high. I was surprised that shuttle system robotic hybrids came out as high as it did. The companies mentioned in parentheses, Exotech, Adabotics, Fabric. I've only recently become aware of those organizations and those technologies within the last couple of years, but I do consider them to be extremely impressive in the sense that they provide high throughput, a great deal of flexibility, no one point of failure, high storage density, and high adaptability. So I'm impressed with the number of respondents that expect to adopt those. It's also worth noting that in the comment section, some respondents did mention plans to adopt AutoStore, so it is possible that some respondents in their own minds put AutoStore in that category. The second most frequently noted emerging technology that respondents expect to adopt within the next 3 years is robotic case picking. I personally had not expected that to be as high as it is. However, comments by respondents did help provide some clarity on that level of expected adoption. One 3PL in particular mentioned that his organization's adoption of the technology is for supporting their retail customers who are doing omni-channel fulfillment from retail locations, and that requires them to have robotic case picking. It supports their ability to build and support mixed pallets for omni-channel fulfillment needs. And then, of course, you have the autonomous mobile robots that are collaborative. They're a fairly new technology. Their growth is rapid, and companies such as Locus and Six River Systems and Fetch are also partners with Manhattan Associates. Finally, the Kiva type zone-based robots still being adopted, and robotic item picking. That's a really complex task that they're looking to tackle. They've made great advances. There is adoption in place at this time. However, the use cases are still somewhat limited, but I do expect the use cases to expand as the top technology progresses and more companies look to automate those processes. So there is a range of views in the market about the value or the importance of obtaining warehouse automation from a single vendor. If you look at some of the large, broad-based warehouse automation vendors, they'll tell you that one of their differentiating, factors that they bring to the table is their customers' ability to purchase and implement a broad range of warehouse automation subsystems from one vendor and have a big bang implementation. Now, there's also other vendors that will say, what we can do for you is you can purchase a subsystem that best meets your particular needs, and we can come in and integrate all of those technologies seamlessly with one one neutral warehouse control system, or warehouse execution system. So we asked respondents directly, what is the importance to you of obtaining warehouse automation from a single vendor? And we provided them with a scale of importance. And as you can see from the responses, it looks very much like a normal distribution with a peak in the middle and a little bit of a skew to a higher level of importance. And what that tells me is that, having this homogeneous environment from a single vendor is a nice to have, but not a must have, and not likely a deal breaker. And in fact, in many cases, probably not even a reality, a realistic option, I should say. Now let's move from warehouse automation to warehouse software. What are the adoption and upgrade expectations of practitioners for categories of warehouse software? Now, in front of you, we provided the respondents with, again, a timeline of expectations, including the option of no expectation for adoption. And as far as the next 12 months or 1 to 3 years, WMS was the technology that the highest percentage of respondents expect to either adopt or upgrade. I think that supports the view that WMS is a mission-critical application for complex fulfillment operations. And it's a backbone of the warehouse, and it's a must-have, and it remains, a key investment for today's warehouses. And that was followed by the percentage, 69% for warehouse labor management. Again, a previous slide on reasons for the adoption of warehouse automation showed that labor and labor factors are a major factor itself for the adoption of warehouse automation. And it's not surprising that warehouses, whether it be manual or partially automated, are looking to manage their human resources as efficiently and effectively as possible. And then my personal view is that slotting and cubing optimization and voice recognition are supporting technologies that can provide that, that step improvement in throughput or efficiency within a warehouse. And then we took a separate angle for this final slide. We said, okay, we took the perspective of capital is a scarce resource, time is a scarce resource. You cannot adopt all the technologies that you would like. So if you had to choose, your one highest priority technology for adoption in the next 3 years, what would that be? Well, WMS was by far the choice that the highest percentage of respondents chose as their highest priority technology for the next 3 years. And I think that again supports the view that WMS is the backbone of a warehouse, and it's a mission critical application for today's sophisticated fulfillment operations. And then looking at the other technology options that registered fairly high levels, AGVs, Kiva-like or point-to-point, high percentage of respondents, fairly high, still see that as sort of their highest priority technology. I think that supports the view that these technologies are valued due to their flexibility. They're highly flexible technologies that can be adjusted to changing conditions in the warehouse. And then shuttle systems, as I stated previously, separate ARC research shows that adoption of those systems is growing rapidly as they do provide that high degree of throughput, flexibility, and storage density. And then again, labor management showing a high percentage there due to the challenges, the labor challenges that warehouses have been facing in the recent past. Finally, I'd just like to note the low percentage there for conveyors and automatic sortation at 2% for the highest priority. I think that again supports the view that conveyors are a ubiquitous technology, but not necessarily a strategic one for most operations. Finally, I'd like to just go through the key takeaways from this research and from today's presentation. Our research shows that practitioners expect the high growth in direct-to-consumer channels to continue into the future. Agility and responsiveness are increasingly important capabilities in today's warehouses due to the ever-changing environment. And it's important to also note that these survey responses were obtained in January and February of this year. So they were provided prior to the global COVID-19 pandemic and what the IMF refers to as the Great Lockdown, becoming a likely scenario or even a reality. So these responses do not likely reflect the impact of this scenario. However, my perspective is that the same trends will still mostly occur as if the pandemic had not occurred, but with the understanding that technology and investment in large-scale process changes will likely experience a time delay. They'll be pushed back a bit. And in addition, I believe the shift to e-commerce and omni-channel and away from traditional brick and mortar will be accelerated due to the current environment. So I believe that the mix of e-commerce sales would be higher in 2021 than I would have thought they would be or would have forecasted a year ago. But again, lower than the current mix today with the current social distancing measures in place. So I think that, obviously more and more consumers will go back to brick and mortar stores. However, I don't think it will be as high as it was prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. And I'd also, again, like to state that Manhattan Associates plans to make these slides available to attendees after the event. And the slides do include at the end an appendix, which contains the industry breakdown of respondents as well as the methodology used to obtain the responses. Thank you.